of them, not the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and all I'm saying is when we split the check 3 ways, the steak eater picks the pocket of the salad man. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at superhero movies that were poorly received upon release, but only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's sometimes a challenge, but always a good time. And this week, we are talking Mystery Men. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the man who knows a lot about comic books but doesn't actually have any superpowers whatsoever, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
You're just getting more and more on the nose with every week with these introductions.
I'm joined by my red-headed co-host who lives north of me.
Yes, I am very ready to talk about Mystery Men, also known as, in some circles, the greatest movie of all time.
Some would say, actually, which begs the question, why are we talking about it here? Well, we cover poorly received superhero movies, right? That's our whole thing. We dig into things that were poorly received. We bring you all the positives, everything we like about it. Now, we're going to jump into a little bit. Rotten Tomato score, critic reception is not the worst. It's technically certified fresh. As far as its history, kind of with the internet at large, I think it definitely has its fan base. I think it's a very large cult movie. But box office did absolutely horrible. Bombed at the box office. And really took a long time to find that following, so it's not like DVD sales or VHS sales at the time were skyrocketing. So even still, 20 years later, this movie's kind of flying under the radar for a lot of people. The reception, you might say that it's better received some other movies that we've covered, but you know what? Not enough people talk about this movie. So
absolutely.
We are going to jump into it. And what's your history with this movie, Andrew? How long ago did you see it? How many times have you seen it over the years?
I watch this movie regularly, and I'm not even kidding. Like, this movie, I watch at least 3 or 4 times a year, if not more.
Quarterly.
This is
wow.
Quarterly. It's a quarterly. I have it as part of my maintenance schedule at work, actually. Andrew watches Mystery Men. Scheduled. We put it into service now. Make sure that I get the email notifications when the maintenance is beginning.
Does a wonder for productivity, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because at that moment, you just feel like you have to go and do something with your life. But, no, I don't think I saw this in theaters. I don't remember seeing it in theaters. I remember having a friend saying he saw it in theaters, and there was like 3 other people there with him. But I know I had this on VHS, so I must have had it in the aftermath. Like, when it hit video, it made its way into my household. And this is legit something my entire family loves. Everybody in my family loves watching Mystery Men. It's never... If I walked into a house, my entire family, and they were having like a beat down, drag out argument with each other, I could be like, I'm going to put on Mystery Men, and they'd be like, all right, we don't sit down for those 2 hours. The world would be okay.
Yeah, it's a powerful movie in that way. I can say I did see this in theaters, which I'm kind of proud of in like a very hipster way. Like, I was there from the beginning. My dad took me, Tomball Cinema 6, as it was known at the time, 6 screen theater in a small town outside of Houston, and we were literally the only 2 people in the theater. And I remember going to school later that week, and my friend Brandon, this was, I don't know, 3rd grade, however old I was at the time, had also seen the movie in theaters. So I knew this one other kid who I could talk about this movie with, and we quoted it. We knew all the lyrics to All Star by Smash Mouth, because this is where that song comes from. The music video is a Mystery Men music video, if you've ever seen that. Not a Shrek song. Not hashtag not my Shrek song.
Sorry, Shrekies, you don't get this one.
Yeah, and I mean, I enjoyed it as a kid watching a fun superhero movie. The appreciation has only grown from there. What this movie accomplishes is just, it's honestly incredible. I don't want to talk it up too much, I guess. I mean, we're going to jump into all the positives, it's what we do here. So I have no idea at this time how long this episode will be, but Andrew, this might be our first 5-hour podcast.
I'm thinking this might be our first mini-series.
We're just,
it's gonna
do a table read of the
series. I mean, it may as well be at this point by the time we're done. So, but no, yeah, it's an interesting movie to watch, especially in the age that follows, especially that like nebulous time like between this and like phase 2 of the MCU, when like there was all this mindset of like you don't want to confuse the audience, you don't want to do too much. There was like this big fear of like doing too much and alienating the audience. And I guess this movie's box office may show that you still can do that. But what it accomplishes with all of these new characters introducing it at once and still succeeding narratively, it's something that genuinely could be a blueprint for so many other things. It's amazing what this movie was able to accomplish.
The way this movie is a send up of the genre, spoof, homage, parody, but a good superhero movie in its own right. The way it accomplishes that, in my opinion, the most impressive thing about this movie is the fact that it was released in 1999, before X-Men and Spider-Man, before the superhero genre blew up. It was scarce throughout the 80s and 90s. There were definitely superhero movies, but it hadn't quite become like its own genre of blockbuster like it is now.
Right.
Ahead of its time. I mean, that gets thrown around for a lot of movies, but I genuinely mean that 100% this movie. Absolutely ahead of its time. Specifically, it's released August 6th, 1999, so very tail end of summer there, on a budget of $68 million, which is a decent sized budget for a movie like this.
But not insignificant in a budget, yeah.
At the box office, it only brings in $33 million. It barely crosses $33 million, so huge box office bomb. Critically, it gets decent reviews. Currently, it holds a 61% on Rotten Tomatoes. Not sure what it was at the time. I would guess it's ticked up a little bit over the years as they've accrued a few more reviews. But regardless, it's riding the line between what they consider fresh or certified. So critics are kind of split. Now, here's what's amazing. We say all the time on the show, the audience score is typically a little bit higher. Audiences are usually a little bit more forgiving. People that are passionate about movies are typically the ones going on and leaving these reviews. Andrew, the audience score is 57%. It's lower. And that's based on 100,000 reviews.
This is a call to action to all of our fans. This needs to be fixed.
We got to write this wrong.
This cannot stand. So what I'm saying, I don't need it to be long, but I need you to go in there and give it a review. And we need it. It needs to be at least at 60%. And I believe in us. I think, I believe in you the same way this movie believes in me. And we can right this wrong. And this is maybe the first step back for all of us as a people. So let's go.
Let's get rid of that trash can sign that's on this movie's page because it's below 60%. We can do this. It's a great call to action, Andrew. Now, Andrew, whenever we first started putting a list together of movies that we're going to cover, this wasn't one that I put on the list. Because the reception's kind of hit or miss. It's positive in some circles. But also, I did not know this was based on a comic book. Technically, Now, I know nothing about this comic. I'm guessing it's going to be kind of a Men in Black situation where there's not too much connective thread between the comic and what we saw in the movie, but I don't know. You're the comic book expert. This is based on Flaming Carrot Comics by Bob Burden. I don't know what this is, Andrew. Where does this come from?
So the character is the Flaming Carrot, and he is, as you would suggest, a guy who has a flaming carrot for a head. Very, very straightforward.
Okay.
The Mystery Men are characters that appear in this book. So it's not like a situation where, like, this was like an anthology comic. The Flaming Carrot is his own guy, but within that comic was a group called the Mystery Men, and some of them show up in this movie, some of them don't. Other ones are kind of jokes the creator came up with, and some of them are just completely new creations. Some of the ones that are from the comics are Mr. Furious and the Shoveler and the Spleen. Also, Dr. Heller is from the comics. Apparently, Invisible Boy was a joke that Bob Burden thought of at a party about a kid that could turn invisible, but only when nobody's watching. So they ran with that. And some of the others are just original creations. So it's definitely, it airs more towards a Men in Black situation where we've got some threads that we've kind of spun into a whole new thing. So yeah, I mean, this is not. I don't even think you can buy like a Mystery Men collection of comics. I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist.
Now, the movie is written by Neil Cuthbert, who doesn't have a ton of credits to their name. Before this, probably most notably, they were a co-writer on Hocus Pocus, which is, talk about a movie with a cult following. After this movie, would go on to write The Adventures of Pluto Nash. I don't know, maybe we'll cover that on this podcast one day. So,
One day.
Quite a interesting body of work this gentleman has, but other than that, I just don't know much about this guy.
Now, I have read that there was a lot of kind of improvisation on set. There was a lot of, apparently, Bob Burden himself consulted on a lot of stuff with the script. So there's a very real chance that we're looking at like an Iron Man situation here where like a script was written, but then everybody kind of got a hold of it and did their own thing. I think it was Ben Stiller who said that like everybody was basically like reworking like all of the scenes they were in because they all wanted them to get, they were all trying to apparently give themselves the cool part. And in turn, they all ended up with the cool part. So it's very possible that like that's the situation we're looking at of like a, hey, here's a script that everybody involved kind of punched up on their own because there was a lot of creative people involved in this project. I mean, a lot of the people in this movie were writers and directors and a variety of things in their own right, and apparently brought a lot of that through to the final movie.
Similarly, this movie is directed by Kinka Usher, which is probably a name that most people haven't heard of, because this is virtually the only movie they've directed. It was their feature-length directorial debut, but they are a very high-profile commercial director, award-winning commercial director, very well known in that industry, gets pulled up to the big leagues for Mystery Men, and that, again, is about it. Goes back to doing commercials.
Yeah, it's interesting, because typically you, like David Fincher, did commercials, and then kind of crossed to the movies, had not so great an experience, went back to commercials, and then graduated into full, now all he does is film, with the occasional prestige commercial. It's typically the reverse, where you do commercials, and that's your gateway into films. And that's just not what happened here. He was apparently not the first choice, which I thought was interesting. They approached, apparently, Danny DeVito, of all people, to both star and direct. I have no idea who DeVito would have played. I'm curious. I don't know if he would have been the villain or a hero. I have no idea. It's tough to imagine.
I can kind of see him as Mr. Furious. I can kind of see him like getting angry. Not the same as what Ben Stiller's doing here, but I can see the joke of like a short little guy getting mad. Maybe
the shoveler. I don't know. Like I can't like. It's something that's an interesting choice, and I'm curious how that would have worked. But apparently, those discussions broke down over who would produce the soundtrack. I don't know what it was that was so apparently not an All-Star fan, which we'll choose not to hold against him. And then apparently Ben Stiller was actually approached to rewrite the script and direct it, but he's like, this is at the time he didn't think that was something he was really built for, so he just opted to star instead. And then that's when Kinka Usher got brought on board, who had done the Got Milk and the Taco Bell Chihuahua campaigns. So you've seen his work before this because everybody saw those friggin' commercials. But it's an interesting choice. And he apparently said that when he first got the script, he wasn't super into it. He thought it wasn't that great of a script, but they all got in and apparently, like I said, made that thing work. It's pretty incredible with, this kind of debunks the too many cooks can spoil the broth phrase. Yeah, a little bit. So many creative forces, and usually that is a recipe for disaster with a movie like this, but they made it work. Let's talk about the movie that we got. A trio of wannabe superheroes who go by the names Mr. Furious, the Shoveler, and Blue Raja work tirelessly to make a name for themselves in Champion City. Meanwhile, the city's most iconic superhero, Captain Amazing, releases his arch-nemesis Casanova Frankenstein from prison in an effort to drum up more publicity. When his plan backfires and he is held captive by the supervillain, it's up to the ragtag team of wannabe heroes to save the day. The team expands when new members Invisible Boy, the Bowler, Spleen, and Sphinx are recruited to join the battle against the League of the city's most dangerous villains. What an exciting caper this is, right? Just tons of heroes and tons of villains that before you start this movie,
you had never heard of before. It's
Right.
really an incredible accomplishment. Like you said, how many characters it introduces you to, and like, almost right away with every character, you're like, I get it. You know, I get the
Boom.
gimmick, I get the character, I get the comedy, I get how they fit in with the team. It's I would say it's like a masterclass in screenwriting, but I don't know how much of this is in the script and how much of it is
Right. Yeah.
improv or each individual actor bringing something to the character.
Yeah, it's tough to really know because, like I said, I think it was Stiller who said that like everybody was just constantly reworking it, and I think he pointed specifically to himself, Hank Azaria, Paul Rubens, and Janine Garofalo were the ones that were really, and it makes sense. They were all four of like the biggest creatives involved in the movie, so it doesn't shock me at all that they were huge in rewriting huge parts of the script to punch it up and try to find that chemistry and all of that and make it work. But how much of that was by design and how much of that was by happenstance, you can't say. But at the end of the day, the final film, extremely effective.
Well, let's talk about the cast specifically, and we're going to start at the high point with the best casting, the best performance in the movie. Every week, we choose one person who goes so far above and beyond with their performance that they elevate the quality of the entire film. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Now, Andrew, this is a tough decision for me. I don't know about you, but I'm going to let you go first. Who gets?
Oh, thank you.
Who gets your Mark Strong Award for Mystery
Oh
Men?
my god. I don't even know where to begin because I could give like an impassioned speech on every single person in this movie because all of them are so unbelievably effective in their roles to the point that, like you said, when you imagine Danny DeVito being in this movie, like I can't imagine him as any of these characters.
Right.
Because the way they are is so individualized to the actors playing them. Which, then again, you read the story, it sounds like that was part of the point, but it's so tough to pick. And I am going to go with I'm going with my odd choice, just because watching it back, I don't know if he gets enough credit for what he does. But I'm actually going to give it to Greg Kinnear as Captain Amazing / Lance Hunt. Because
I love it. I love it.
Because he is like, and again, we'll talk about everybody else, and I'm sure your Mark Strong is different. But like I said, and you could go on for hours about these people, but he's so unbelievable. Like before evil douchey Superman was a thing, we had Captain Amazing. Like in 1999, you had Greg Kinnear, who to that point, I don't know if he'd really played like a jerk in movies before. I don't really know if that was his thing. But he comes into this and he's got the big emblem on his chest. He flies. He's got the big powers. He's got the publicity. He's got the sponsorships. Like he's this weird mashup of like Superman via Booster Gold, all these different like ideas put together. I mean, he really kind of is Booster Gold. He's got
and definitely
the stuff giving
Batman.
him
He's got
powers.
the billionaire alter
He's
ego.
got the alter ego. But he's so perfect in this role because like the movie opens and he's got the big scene where he jumps into the nursing home and he takes out this gang when our other heroes are ineffective at doing it. And he walks out and he's doing the PR, like he's pushing the person in the wheelchair and just like shoves him away and like down the stairs. But then he gets into the car and he's just this unbelievably whiny jerk who's mad about his sponsorships and he's bored that he doesn't have any more supervillains. Like he's bored that he doesn't have anything to do, basically. And like that's literally the precipice of the entire plot, is that he's so desperate to actually fight somebody that he lets one of his worst villains, or he helps manipulate the system to get one of his worst villains out of prison. And then he gets captured with like his interactions with the team, the whole argument about the toggles where they're going endlessly back and forth, where they're going
Flip
on
the
and on,
second
and
toggle.
ultimately
Flip it. Flip it.
Flip it! Hold on. Is there some sort of reset? No, there's not a reset button. You're a moron. You're more like you could tell that he sees himself as so much above these people. And he sees them as like literally the dirt on his shoe, that when they just don't understand what he's saying, instead of like trying to like effectively explain it, he just gets pissed and it literally gets him killed. Like it's unbelievable. He's so good at it though. And I just don't think people talk enough about him in this ensemble because everybody else is so good. So it's a left field choice, but I'm giving it to Greg Kinnear as Lance Hunt / Captain Amazing.
I love it. I love that choice. I mean, screen time wise is lower than a lot of the other cast members, but this role is very important because it establishes like the baseline. Like this is a true hero in this world. You can't have wannabes if you don't know what the standard is.
Right.
And he's so good at that. And he's so schemy and gross and such a jerk. And Greg Kinnear just like having the time of his life. You can just tell whenever he's in the back of the limo and they're hatching the scheme to release Casanova Frankenstein. Like whenever that idea comes into his head, he's like the Grinch thinking of an idea, and he just turns the camera and one eyebrow goes up like 3 inches. Like
I was gonna say that eyebrow goes like all the way into his hairline. It's freaking insane.
It's so good. Yeah, man, I agree. I absolutely love this performance.
So good.
The man's making choices, and there is a line delivery that has been burned into my brain for 22 years, however long ago I first saw this movie. I will never forget it. It's whenever he releases Casanova Frankenstein from, we keep saying prison, I guess it's technically an insane asylum, but
yeah.
And then Casanova Frankenstein blows up the insane asylum, so Captain Amazing flies over to his house, because, he knows where the super villain is. And he walks in, and they're having like a classic hero and villain back and forth, kind of a battle of wits, and he's telling him, disarm all these traps and everything. And then he picks up a device, and he doesn't know that this device has like this knockout gas. And whenever the gas comes out and he sniffs it, before he hits the ground, he just goes, "Oh, dang." It's so weird. It doesn't even sound like his voice. I feel like he did it like just to make the crew laugh, and they used that take and just kept it in the movie, but I will never forget the way he says that. "Oh, dang."
"Oh, dang." Just falls down. I love that whole scene because it's just like, it's this like weird take on like the whole villain hero meeting scene where they have like their super intellectual speech back and forth, and like I love the part where Casanova Frankenstein is like, "Did you know that?" And Captain Amazing is like, "No, but I did know that you'd know that I knew you knew." It's like that whole back and forth where he's like,
"Yes,
but I didn't. I only knew that you knew I knew."
It's very Austin Powers, and it's
right.
Disable the laser on your, ring and your special boots and all that stuff, all these silly gadgets and everything. This movie, I don't know if it rides the line. It more just like hops lanes seamlessly between parody and genuine action and homage. And this, Captain Amazing, and especially this sequence we're talking about, is definitely more of like the parody. Like you have to have knowledge of how this is supposed to go down to appreciate how goofy this is. But there's other times in the movie where it's like a legit good superhero movie, or it's more like an homage, like it's taking itself seriously. And it just transitions between those lanes so well. But yeah, Greg Kinnear, man, that's a great choice. There's really no wrong choices. I have my pick here for Mark Strong Award, but yeah, I could have gone Greg Kinnear. I could have go Ben Stiller as Mr. Furious. You can go William H. Macy as Shoveler. I mean, we're going to talk about all of these, but my pick, what I had in my gut, because they've been my favorite character in this movie since I first saw it, my Mark Strong Award is going to Janine Garofalo as the bowler. Because...
fantastic choice.
Hot damn, that is such a cool power. I mean, she's one of... I guess it's technically her dad's skull and the bowling ball that's the power, not her, but she's one of the few characters that actually has a supernatural ability.
Right.
Her father's skull is in a bowling ball, and it has its own consciousness, and she can throw it around, and it bounces around and takes people out, and it's just such a cool visual. Ever since I first saw this movie, I was like, I gotta get a bowling ball like that. Between this and Kingpin, when Bill Murray has the rose inside of his bowling ball, I was like, I've got to get bowling. I have one, by the way. I have a brain instead of a bowling ball that looks like this.
Oh,
but,
fantastic.
Yeah, dream come true. But it's so cool. And Janine Garofalo is, I love Janine Garofalo. She is hilarious. She can be like over the top funny, but also other times like really understated. Like you almost miss how funny she is because of how cool, calm, and collected she always is.
Right.
She's in, Wet Hot American Summer, which is inarguably the funniest movie of all time. I mean, love this woman, love her in this movie. Definitely, I'll admit, big crush of mine as a kiddo. I mean, the alternative girl, she's got the green hair, super cool. But at any rate, yeah, her turn here as the bowler, her back and forth with her dad. She has these conversations with the bowling ball that they're very funny back and forth, but it's not really back and forth because it's just her talking to herself. But she makes it work. She makes it funny. It's good. I like she doesn't put up with anybody's crap. She doesn't let herself get belittled by Mr. Furious. I mean, character is wonderful. All these characters are great. But again, my gut was telling me the bowler, Janine Garofalo, she gets my Mark Wrong award.
She went, or one of the high schools she went to was the one I went to.
Fun fact.
But yeah, Katy, Texas. Be a brief period of time. But yeah, Janine Garofalo is great in this movie. She's great in almost everything. Reality Bites, even her bit part in Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion.
Oh yeah,
I think she's always hilarious. She's always funny. I've just always enjoyed watching her in this, and she is. That's actually what I like about her character is like she's not a damsel in distress. She's a member of the team. She's on par with the rest. Like she genuinely like quips so hard it just pisses Ben Stiller's character off the whole time because she doesn't just roll over and think he's some amazing superhero. She is on par with everybody, and she's just so funny. This whole cast has this insane chemistry. It's unbelievable to have a group of people. It's almost not fair that a group of actors can be in a group this big and have so much chemistry with each other, and nobody really feels like out of place. Nobody feels like they're being shown up or anything.
And they're
like
all
that.
introduced in this movie. Like it's not like Avengers where most of them before the movie, then you learn who they are
10
ahead
years
of time.
of films before it. Yeah. You've got this moment. You get your big end game sequence where we're all together as a team in our new uniforms for no reason. But like it's just so good. But she particularly, she's the other one that like I definitely thought about. Her introduction is perfect. Like they have this exhaustive search for superheroes that has some fun cameos. I remember Doug Jones is one of the superheroes. Dane Cook, if you're into that sort of thing.
It was funny.
The Waffler.
At one point.
At that time, that was actually the first time I watched this with I think my girlfriend at the time. I had no idea who Dane Cook was, and she was like a huge fan. And so for her, she was like, that was Dane Cook for like that 30 seconds. And I was like,
definitely
oh, wow.
In 1999, they didn't know who he was. In the early 2000s, and then later you go back, like, oh, okay.
Oh, check that out.
Because up until then, we had just known Dane Cook from Double Team. I haven't
thought about that in a very long time. Thank you for bringing that back.
Dennis Rodman vehicle.
Oh, back at that time when we thought athletes could act.
And Janine Garofalo, before we move on, because speaking of like bit parts, Cable Guy, she has like less than a minute of screen time, but it's one of the funniest parts. Very memorable. She's working at medieval times, and Matthew Broderick asks for silverware, and she explains they did not have silverware during the medieval times, therefore we do not have silverware at the medieval times. Can I get your refill? They didn't have silverware, but they had Pepsi. Dude, I'm just doing my job.
She's everything. And then, like you said, she does serious stuff, too. Like, there's a movie I really like called Copland. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's Sylvester Stallone. It's a rare, it's not really rare for Stallone, but it's a Stallone movie where he, directed by and written by James Mangold, actually, before
Logan and Wolverine.
This is late 90s film, but it's about a cop played by Sylvester Stallone who has a bunch of like retired police officers that he kind of idolizes, and he ends up being the sheriff kind of in the town that they all retire to, and ends up realizing that these people might not be the heroes that he thought they were. And it's just weird because it's like De Niro and Ray Liotta and Harvey Keitel, but then like Stallone idolizes them, so it's a very strange dynamic, but it's actually really, really good. It's fantastic. I actually would highly recommend that you watch it, Chris. But
I'll check it out.
But she has a bit part in that, and it's almost completely straight, and she's still good in it. Like, there's no, like, it's definitely not her typical type of character, but just really shows that she really could do anything. And in this one in particular, she shines in a cast where everybody shines.
Well, we've got it's a deep cast. We've got to get through it. So
Yeah.
we have Ben Stiller as the lead character, you could say. Roy, who goes by Mr. Furious. His ability is that he has a boundless rage. When he gets angry, he is unstoppable. And the joke being is, like most of these characters, he's just a normal guy. Nothing really drastic really happens when he gets angry. But it's
Until the end.
well, spoilers, yeah, until the end.
Oh God, Chris, it's a 22-year-old movie at this point.
But the script is amazing. I don't know how much of these lines he brings to it, but this is one of his funniest performances in the 90s and early 2000s, which was really his heyday for comedy. And I know, like, eventually we as a society got sick of Ben Stiller, and we got like a new Ben Stiller comedy every 2 years, it felt like, and I think the world kind of got burned out on him. It's easy to forget that he's like a hilarious actor. Very, very funny. So good at playing it straight. So good at, like, the world is crapping on me, but I've got to, not react to it. I don't know how to describe his style, but, like, it's my my uncle, I'll never forget this, during a particularly not great period of his life, told me, like, man, my life is like a Ben Stiller movie. And that's what he meant by it. Like, life just hates me. Like, it just comedically, stuff just happens to me. And that's kind of Ben Stiller's shtick. And he's so good at it. He's so good at being a punching bag, but you still root for him. In this movie, he's like an unlikable underdog, but we still like him. It's a great quality to have.
Yeah, he's like, obviously I'd love Heavyweights. That will always be one of my favorite movies ever. And he plays the ridiculous, over the top fitness, would-be fitness guru Tony Perkis.
Like White Goodman before Dodgeball.
Yeah, like if you said Heavyweights was a Dodgeball prequel, I'd believe you. It's definitely shades of the same character. But I mean, Reality Bites was 94. That was, for a lot of people, his breakout. And he has a movie he did a lot later called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, based off the short story of the same name. That is actually like a fairly, I don't know if monumental is the right word, but like I watched that and it actually impacted me as a person. I was actually kind of hit on a lot of things that I was feeling at the time. Didn't do well, did kind of middling reviews, didn't make a lot of money, but I caught it on I caught it on the cable at a hotel one night when I was at the first MondoCon. Like my friend and I were like, let's go get dinner, and I turned it on and I was like, oh. And we ended up watching the whole movie before we left.
And you just had this existential experience before going to get dinner?
Yeah. I was basically like, huh. So I was like, that's interesting. But yeah, there was that period of time, especially like Meet the Parents, when stuff like that started, which is actually only the year after this. But like Meet the Parents, Zoolander, it just really felt there for a while that he just became this giant thing that was everywhere.
Yeah.
And there was diminishing returns. I think Along Came Polly was bad for everybody. So a lot of stuff where you were just kind of like, and then he kind of did the Night at the Museum stuff, kind of went more towards some of that. And then Madagascar with the voices. Tropic Thunder, still a highlight. I'm not even going to be sorry for that one. But he's definitely a guy that can be put into a perfect situation, but it just felt like they were like, let's put him in everything, when it was like, I don't really know if this is where I would have put him to really utilize his talent. But Roy's whole thing is he's trying to be cool. Like, he's that kind of character. Like, when he's talking to the girl at the restaurant, he's like trying to sound like super hardcore and like super mysterious and dark. And he just sounds dumb, and she realizes it. And he gets kind of frustrated at first until he finally kind of breaks. And that's when he finally like, oh, this is all kind of dumb. And he kind of gets to rediscover himself and figure himself out. And it's a decent little arc throughout the film for him. But his chemistry, again, with everybody is great. And he's fantastic.
Yeah, he always tries to have like that cool line, that good quip. And it always falls flat, but it's always funny because of that. Like, storming off, saying, okay, I don't need a compass to tell me which way the wind shines.
Looks like tonight I'm riding a wolf pack of one.
Yes. My favorite insult is whenever he's trying to come up with a nickname for the other two superheroes that have to go to home early instead of staying out fighting crime, the Blue Raja and the Shoveler. He's like, well, you're just lazy boy, and they are already gone. He finally comes up with it. The recliner. Lazy Boy and the
Boy,
recliner.
the recliner.
Lazy Boy is a recliner. That's why it's funny.
Exactly. Like the part where the cops are kind of berating them and are just kind of like making fun of him at the beginning for how bad they are, and he's like, "Don't mess with the volcano man. I will go Pompeii on your," and he like accidentally bumps into his friends and he gets all spooked, trying to seem all cool.
Should we just pull up the script, Andrew, and just
Pretty much.
read
Let's
it?
just read the whole script. Yeah. Sorry. Let's move on. Let's move
Okay,
on.
other cast. Hank Azaria plays Jeffrey, who goes by the Blue Raja as his superhero name. His ability is that he can throw forks. And there's a running joke in the movie that his name is the Blue Raja. He doesn't have blue in his costume, but the name actually makes sense if you know the context. And he puts on a British accent to play the character. As many times as I've seen this movie, I still don't know what it means. I've never looked up the Blue Raja or how it all relates to it. I just appreciate the joke in the movie that it's very complicated, and I trust that it means something if I looked into it.
Yeah, he like starts explaining it a couple of different times, but he never actually gets there. But yeah, the whole joke is that he's the Blue Raja, master of silverware, but he will not throw knives, and there's no blue in his costume. So it's definitely one of those jokes that they just dedicate to the whole time. Never explained. He never actually gets to finish telling the story of why he's called the Blue Raja, but it's very funny. Obviously, Hank Azaria is, the greatest actor of all time. He's responsible for some of obviously The Simpsons alone.
Like 75% of the greater Simpsons cast.
Yeah, he's Moe, he's Chief Wiggum, he's Cletus, he's Professor Frink, he was a Pooh for a long time. He's comic book guy. He's like, it's him. Yeah, there's like 3 people that voice like 90% of The Simpsons. So it's always, I always thought it'd be funny to be in that like recording room just to watch them all talk to the same people the whole time. But I love his character in this because he's another one that's like has the monologues with himself in the mirror where he's trying to like hype up his superhero persona, and he's just so effective at it. And he's got the relationship with his mother, where his mom is kind of like sneaking into his business because she's like weirded out by whatever it is he does. They have a nice bonding moment at the end that I always think is really heartfelt and actually comes through, even though we're dealing with a very, very strange situation.
Yes. His mom, the actress looks to be like 5 years older than Hank Azaria, but she has a gray wig on.
Yeah, but it works, man. I like it.
Yeah.
There's one scene where they're in the final fight, and like there's this giant switch. And he pulls out a fork and he's like, I knew I should have brought my large pie server. And it's just like, why even think of that?
Yeah, I love Hank Azaria. Mostly it's voice work, mostly it's The Simpsons, but it's a treat anytime he's actually physically, on my screen. He has a recurring role throughout Friends, and he is, if I may go on a tangent here, my favorite of Phoebe's love interests. And in my opinion, Phoebe should have ended up with his character. Paul Rudd is great. I love Paul Rudd. Yeah, great guy. But Hank Azaria was the one for Phoebe, if you ask me. So
maybe a hot take. We'll see. We'll see what the fans say to that, Chris.
Yeah, we'll see if anybody's impassioned about that.
All of our fans that watch Friends.
William H. Macy plays Eddie, a superhero name being the Shoveler, and his ability, you guessed it, he wields a shovel. He wears a hard hat and his son's catcher's vest to protect him.
Yeah, like chest protector, yeah. Just, again, it's William H. Macy, obviously, he's
the greatest actor of all time. I know we throw that around a lot, but the answer is William H. Macy.
Yeah, I mean, this is a movie that so far has like 5 of the... every single person we've talked about now has a claim to the greatest actor of all time. But I love William H. Macy. Obviously, Fargo being a personal favorite. His character in that is wildly different from this one. In that one, he's much more sniveling and conniving and inept. But
he can do
here,
anything.
He really can. And like Shameless, if you've seen that, he plays an even more different character. But like here, he's very like, he's like meant to be like the kind of, I don't know if I'd say the moral compass of the group, but he's meant to be kind of like the noble one, kind of the upstanding one. He's the guy that kind of tries to hold it all together, but the whole struggle that he has is his wife is kind of like, first off, your son needs his vest back for his baseball game. But secondly, just like, how long are you going to keep doing this? That's the struggle there. She's like, she's the one that kind of tells him like, yeah, you shovel really well, but like, that doesn't really make you a superhero. She's the one that's kind of trying to give him that as she thinks, reality check throughout this whole film, but he doesn't go for it. And yeah, he's definitely kind of the straight man of the group, but he's great at it. He's perfectly cast. He plays the role. Again, like if you try to suggest somebody else for any of these roles, I can't see it. I can't see anybody else being in this role.
He's so good. He's that suburban dad look and feel and mannerisms, and his performance is just like fastball down the middle. It's just straightforward suburban dad who happens to be a superhero, and it's such a funny note to hit. But yeah, William H. Macy, man, I love him in Thank You for Smoking, which is a great movie if you haven't seen it. But he is a senator from Wisconsin who's trying to take down big tobacco, and they try to flip it on him and bring up the country's cholesterol problem. And Wisconsin is one of the leading producers of cheese, and his line delivery on "The state of Wisconsin will not apologize for its cheese" is another line that is burned into my brain. Yeah, I love this guy.
Oh, I'd forgotten about that one.
Kel Mitchell plays the Invisible Boy.
Man, Kel Mitchell.
I love Kel. Now, I mean, I haven't seen him and stuff in forever, probably since this, and of course, eternally linked to Kenan Thompson. And Kenan has gone on to have a insane career. He's the longest running SNL cast member of all time, which is just wild to think about. Good for you, Kenan. But you know what, Kel? He deserves as much success. I really enjoy this guy's work, which sounds so funny because I'm mostly talking about like all that in Kenan and Kel, and I'm sure a lot of those, if I go back and watch them now, maybe don't hold up. But in this movie, we can talk about, he plays this part so well. They keep calling him kid. He's clearly like the young one in the group, but he seems to be like well into his 20s. I don't know how young he's supposed to be, really, but he's very like earnest and very like just excited to be part of the team, and it's really fun. And his gimmick is hilarious. He can turn invisible, but only when no one is looking at him, including himself. If he looks at himself, he no longer is invisible. In that scene where he's like explaining that power, and they're all trying to wrap their head around it.
They're all trying to like rationalize it in their heads. Yeah.
And so they ask the obvious question, how do you know that you're invisible? He says, well, when you turn invisible, and everybody leans forward to see what he's going to say, you can feel it. Perfect. Perfect. Delivers it so well.
Yeah. Kenan and Kel was actually still on when this came out, which I actually think.
Oh, wow, funny. That's cool.
It goes that runs until 2000, and so this was.
So in 1999, we're like, wow, Kel's going to be the breakout star of Kenan and Kel.
Right. You at that moment you thought he might have a chance. People were thinking that he might be the big one, but he wasn't. No, but you're right. He is the earnest one of the group. He's the one that's like a fan of superheroes, and he's talking about how he hangs out with these guys down at the costume shops, and like apparently there's a huge costume shop industry in Champion City there. But he plays it perfectly. Like he doesn't feel like he's being dwarfed by anybody. He feels like the character he plays is very much like it fits into his wheelhouse, kind of what he was known for, and it works. He's got the innocence, the kind of wide-eyed enthusiasm of everything they're doing. He's along for the ride. And he wants to help. He wants to be a superhero. And there's something pretty noble about that.
Paul Reubens plays Spleen. And look, if we haven't said it already, I made it obvious. This movie is perfectly cast. Every character, perfect. And there's some bizarre choices, including this one right here. Paul Reubens in 1999 is a pretty bizarre choice for this character. He is known almost exclusively as Pee Wee Herman, has a very public downfall, you could say, in the 90s, and kind of disappears from the public eye. And this is more or less his return to the spotlight, along with Blow, which I think comes out a couple of years later. And this character as Spleen is nothing like Pee Wee Herman. He's almost reinventing himself for the public. And Paul Reubens is so damn funny. And we ought to give out our Mark Strong Awards. There's no wrong answer for Mark Strong Award. But in terms of an actor elevating a role, he elevates hell out of a superhero whose superpower is to fart. Like, that is such a one-note joke, and he makes it work. And it's hilarious throughout the entire movie. And probably the cherry on top for me in this performance is in the climax of the movie, he gets shot in the butt and he's freaking out. Invisible Boy asks him if his powers still work. He's like, "Oh, let's check." And he pulls his finger and he knocks some people out. And he says, "It'll do." And then he just flops over.
Passes out. Yeah.
It's just, he puts so much into this performance. He looks gross. He's got like pimples all over his face. And again, just
Teeth
like
are all nasty.
I didn't do research on Blue Roger to figure that out. I also don't know why he's called Spleen. Is spleen related to flatulence, Andrew?
I don't know if in the comics that's what he's known for. I think more he's just kind of like a 70s love child type guy. But I don't really know why he's called the spleen either. Because like I said, these aren't easy things to find. But yeah, this is definitely a role where if you told me that Paul Reubens was a big part of like making it work, I would absolutely believe that. I think this has definitely got like his fingerprints all over it. And I think that's actually the interesting part too, is like you can definitely tell where people's fingerprints are on characters. You can tell that like some of these, like Janine Garofalo, like catering the bowler to her sensibilities and her style of humor, like it doesn't shock me. Ben Stiller, Paul Reubens, the same. That all seems perfectly in line with everything about them. But this one especially, like very much, I'm like, yeah, if Paul Reubens completely rewrote every scene this character was in to make him a standout, I wouldn't be shocked whatsoever. He really, really shines here.
Jeffrey Rush plays our main villain, Casanova Frankenstein. Now, Jeffrey Rush, he is great in this movie. It's like he's great in everything. But Andrew, look, #positivity podcast, but I got to get something off my chest here. Most of these characters are very, Mr. Furious, he gets angry. Shoveler uses the shovel. Blue Raja is confusing, but that's the joke that is confusing, right? They're instantly identifiable. I don't understand Casanova Frankenstein. Casanova means like ladies' man, right? That's kind of the shorthand there.
You're going to reduce it, sure.
And then, excuse me. And then Frankenstein is, Frankenstein's monster horror. I don't understand how you put those two things together and get this. I don't understand what this is. I don't understand this character. And I'm not attacking Jeffrey Rush. The performance works. But as far as like a gimmick and a villain, I don't get it, Andrew. Am I missing something?
He's a womanizing mad scientist. What's hard to understand?
Okay, so he's a mad scientist because he creates that machine that kills.
He creates the psychofraculator.
How's he a woman? Is he a womanizer?
I don't know. Maybe it's just how he dresses. I don't know. Like he's obviously got his friggin' therapist to fall in love with him.
That's like, not obvious, by the way, because it wasn't until right before we hit record that you told me. Like,
she's the one that says he should get out of prison, even though he's crazy.
Andrew, listen.
Like she's very clearly like if you watch the scene where she's arguing that he should get parole. Like, there's very clearly something going on there.
Yeah, it's like a Harley Joker situation.
Yes.
I guess I get it. Okay.
Also, like, his look, like, it's like, if you look, like, he's got that kind of, like, the smoking jackets, the ornate houses, stuff like that. I think that all kind of plays into the Casanova part of it. And there's probably a more simple explanation that Casanova Frankenstein is just a cool name. Like, it just sounds like a villain name. But yeah, I've never found that particularly confusing.
There's a little more layers to it, I guess, than something like the Disco Boys. They have afros, or
they listen to disco,
the frat boys. They look like
everybody else is very straightforward. He's the one that's a little stranger.
Makes you think. I guess.
Is Lance Hunt actually a captain? Like, how far does this go, Chris?
Captain
I bet he wasn't even in the military.
A superhero thing, Captain.
I'm joking, Chris. God dang it. I bet he didn't even serve.
You didn't earn that title. Private Amazing. Okay.
Citizen Amazing.
Jeffrey Rush, I think of as like, Patrick Stewart level of just classically trained, almost Shakespearean level, like actor, like super serious. And he's in this movie, and in particular, there's a scene where he's sitting in his limo and Paul Reubens blows a huge fart in his face that ruffles his hair. And I'm watching the scene and I'm like, man, he went like all in. Like he's not too good for this. He's not doing like this movie a favor by lending it a big hand. He is like laying into this character. And again, this movie is perfectly cast. It's incredible they got Jeffrey Rush to do this role. And it's as much as I think that the gimmick was hard for a little brain like me to grasp, I think the performance is very good.
His second appearance on our show, no less.
What else was he in?
Green Lantern. He was Tamar Ray, voice.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Coming back around. No, but I do love his performance. He's like chewing the scenery, like he's giving his grand villain monologues. He's going to town with it. Like you said, the scene where he's bantering back and forth with Captain Amazing that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. If not, maybe not my favorite. We'll get there later. But I love the back and forth they have where like they have this, like I said, they mentioned earlier, but they have this back and forth where they keep going on about like, but I didn't know that. I only knew that you knew I knew.
Right,
and they keep going back and forth, back and forth. And finally, they end it, and Casanova ends with, "Did you know that?" And Captain Amazing just kind of like looks very confused and goes, "Of course," and just like walks on. And it's so ridiculous and over the top, but and then I love the scene where they accidentally kill Captain Amazing before Frankenstein could do it himself. And so he just shows all his gangs that he's already dead, but at one point he picks up this fork and he's like, "A fish fork is no match for my machine." And he's just super infuriated about it, but he's like waving this fork at his psychofraculator, and that image is always hilarious to me.
All right, home stretch on this cast here.
Yep.
Wes Studi plays Sphinx, sort of a mysterious character who comes into the group and becomes a de facto leader that helps them.
Terribly mysterious.
Excuse me. Andrew had his hand held up because you wonder why he stopped talking there. Excuse me. He's terribly mysterious. And who does, we kind of just gloss over it, but he has a superpower. He can he can cut guns in half, which is pretty useful. Not really explained how the hell he does it, but most of this movie, he's sort of putting the heroes through like boot camp because he's kind of a hero that's made it. He's a step above these wannabe heroes, so he's teaching them things. He's constantly throwing out words of wisdom that Mr. Furious calls him out on because it's all kind of like fortune cookie level wisdom.
Yeah.
And he's a Native American actor, and that's what he's most known for, playing a lot of Native American roles. So glad that they didn't make his gimmick a Native American. That
right?
Yeah, they avoid that stereotype. They make him more, like I said, the terribly mysterious guy in a hood. So it's not, we avoid.
You don't actually see his whole face this movie.
That's true.
He wears the mask the entire time. He's very good. Obviously, Wes Studi's in Heat, a fantastic movie. If none of you have seen it, he plays one of the cops. But I love that, like, the joke of his character is that he's just terribly mysterious. Like, when they're first talking about him, they're just like, "What about the Sphinx?" And they're like, "All right, what's his deal?" He's like, "Well, he's terribly mysterious." And he's like, "That's it? He's mysterious?" And he just doubles down with, "He's terribly mysterious." Like, and then finally, Shoveler's the one that throws like, "Yeah, plus, I hear he can, like, cut guns in half with his mind." And, like, he throws it out like it's, like, some rumor he heard. And then it ends up being true, which makes it all the funnier.
He's, like I said, constantly throwing out wisdom. My favorite, it's got to be, "You must lash out with every limb, like the octopus that plays the drums." So good. But most of his are like riddles, like just reversing what he just said. Right. And Mr. Furious calls him out on it. He's like, "Everybody, notice the formula? If you want to push something down, you have to pull it up. If you want to go left, you have to go right." And then Sphinx starts coaching him. "Until you learn to master your rage will be your master."
Rage will become
That's
your
what
master.
you were going to say, isn't it? Not exactly.
Not necessarily.
God, yeah, we can't just quote this movie the whole time, but guys, it's a really good movie.
It's so funny. Yeah, he's really good at it. He comes in pretty late in the game, but he's in. He's on the team, and he's way in. And again, another guy that's like just running with it. Like,
yep,
he's dedicated to what he's doing. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. It's fantastic.
Claire Forlani plays Monica. She is the waitress at the diner that the heroes often frequent after their adventures out in the city, and the love interest from Mr. Furious. And all she really wants is for him to kind of just drop the gimmick for a second and just there's an obvious attraction there, but she wants to know the real Roy. He hesitates to
Yeah.
even say his real name, and eventually they get there, and it's kind of nice. But to be honest, that's kind of her only
Yeah,
role in this movie.
She really is the damsel in this movie. She's she's kidnapped by Frankenstein at the end, and that's what unlocks Mr. Furious's true rage finally, is her being in danger, where he actually gets to do something, and his entire team is kind of in shock that he was actually able to do something for once. But not a whole lot to do here for Claire Forlani, but still, I guess, an integral part. She recurs and is kind of integral in getting Roy to kind of, like I said, come to terms with himself, kind of, because it's not just that he's trying to impress her for a while. It's almost like he's trying to kind of fool himself in a lot of ways into being something he's kind of not. But yeah, I like how it all comes together. And like I said, not a whole lot going on here, but still good.
Okay, fantastic casting here. These last two.
Yep.
I don't know how they thought of this. Real quick, Micro Mark Strong Award to Mindy Marin. That is the casting director for this movie. I had to look it up.
Yeah.
Just because this cast is
So
incredible.
good.
And these little bit parts. We have Doc Heller, who is the weapons manufacturer. He makes these non-lethal weapons that are pretty bizarre, very fun. Played by Tom Waits.
Tom Waits.
Like,
Good
what?
God.
Who thinks of that? But it's perfect. He's so good in this role. He's got that voice. He's kind of like Chris Christopherson, but maybe not quite that crazy. I don't know how to describe his energy here, but he's got that raspy voice. He looks a little disheveled.
Yeah.
He's got these kooky inventions. It is such fun casting. I love it.
That's a voice. Do you smoke cigarettes or do you eat them? But
yeah,
it's he's so good. And I'd actually just randomly watched, not randomly, it was Halloween. Liz and I watched Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, where he plays Renfield, and he's just ridiculously wild and crazy in that movie too. And then there's only one movie he does in between that and this. For a period of time there, he really wasn't showing up in a lot of movies. But he's so good here. And like the whole scene where he's like formally, because he hangs out at the nursing home to pick up women earlier in the movie. They make that joke.
As you do. Yeah.
As you do. But they eventually go and meet him at his abandoned carnival later, also like you do. And he's like explaining his weapons. He's got like the can tornado and like the fabric shrinker and the blame thrower and these just ridiculous weapons. But I love when he explains, he's like, everything I make is non-lethal. And BotR is like, how delightfully eccentric, while also being a complete waste of our time, and like goes to leave. But just that line of how delightfully eccentric is something that I use on a more than regular basis in day-to-day life with just, yep, that's how the world is. But he's so good. And then obviously our mutual friend Doug, the scene at the end where like he's turning on the TV and he's got like this bowl of like cereal or something, and he's like sitting down to watch, and he's like, so what's the deal with that, would that fraculator thing work or what? What's the deal with that? For some reason, that line and that delivery is extremely funny to me and Doug.
Rounding out the cast, Eddie frickin' Izzard plays Tony P, leader of the Disco Boys. And who doesn't love Eddie Izzard on their screen, right?
Right. The performance here is pretty great. They turn in it's dedicated. Again, it's like everybody else in this movie. There's a dedication. There's just an immersion in the role. They're all in. They're having a blast with it, and it all works. It's a smaller part. They're just one of Casanova's minions that's meant to kind of hunt down the mystery men and take them out, and they keep failing. But it's all funny, and it turns out they've got a big part of the bowler's backstory, and so that ends up being a big fact. Makes it a little bit more personal for their characters, and yeah. What else can you say?
There's probably more cast members that we could go through. That covers the main players. I'm sure we'll get to some more as we talk about the scenes. But Andrew, let's start with the best scene of the movie. In your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What do you think is the best scene in Mystery Men?
I'm gonna jump to this one. There's so many good scenes in this movie, but I love the training sequence with the Sphinx. I think that might be like when I think the movie is making me laugh the most. Because basically, like you said, so what's happened is they've chalked it up as a victory over Casanova, where all they really did was beat up his car.
Right.
they've not really done very much, but they're like drinking and celebrating and having like they're treating it like they saved the world when all they really did was piss him off. But it's right after that they get stopped by the Disco Boys, who basically are right about to kill them, and right as they're about to kill them, and just hilariously like disco posing with their guns. Like he says ready, and they all like do the disco point with their guns, and it's hilarious. But Sphinx cuts them all in half, and then basically says that, we need to train you guys. And it's basically they're at Sphinx's compound, whatever you want to call it. But he's basically training each person on their what to do. And some of the lines are, like I said, the octopus with the drums, that's a line here. The whole Mr. Furious blow up where he's like finally calling him out on just his needlessly like double talk, fortune telling advice. All of it's so funny. And then there's the scene where they're all making their costumes, and they're like, the spleen is like, who was looking for the pinching shears? And Mr. Furious is like, I need a thimble. Who's got a thimble? Like just mixed in the middle of all this conversation they're having. And then it ends with like Mr. Furious is like storming off with the wolf pack of one. And I just think this scene is hilarious. It's several scenes, I guess, but this whole sequence is extremely funny, and it allows me to not pick the entire movie as my favorite scene.
It's very funny. It's got one of the more bizarre jokes where Mr. Furious is training, and he's kind of, he's asking Sphinx like why he's doing this, and he explains it to him, and he goes, but why do I have watermelon on my feet? And the camera pans down. His feet are in watermelons. The camera pans back up. There's like we rest for like a whole beat. And then Sphinx goes, I don't remember telling you to do that. And then he walks off. And that could be in like, that's something out of like Hot Shots. Like it's just so ridiculous.
So ridiculous.
Feet are in
but
watermelons.
I love it all the same.
Yeah, that's wild.
It is hilarious.
Yeah, that's very fun. You kind of get teases of their new costumes as you see him working on it. You see like the flames on Mr. Furious, and it's kind of fun. In superhero movies, they usually debut like a new costume, a new flashy costume at the end, and there's kind of a story purpose for why they have new costumes at the end. It's part of their training to make new ones. I don't know, but it's an excuse to have a pretty fun scene, like you're saying, them all like at what looks to be like summer camp by the lake during the training sequence. Yeah. It's good. It's very good. And you're right. I mean, I could pick almost any scene from this movie and make a case for why it's my favorite. It's so good. What is this podcast, dude? This is not what we normally do on this podcast.
This is not it.
Kid in a candy store.
Kids, just don't get too used to this. This is not. Is not.
We'll be miserable again soon. I shouldn't say that.
Hashtag PP, guys.
What I ultimately decided on is my favorite scene. It comes pretty late in the movie. It's actually right before they head to Casanova Frankenstein's for the last time for the final showdown. And they're all at Doc Heller's place, gearing up, but they're actually considering quitting. Even Sphinx says that sometimes the bravest thing to do is to run away. And they're on the brink of just not even trying. And Shoveler, of all people, has a legit, like, iconic and motivating pep talk that begins with an egg salad sandwich. He's like, you see this? It's loaded in calories. My wife wouldn't let me touch the stuff. But I figure, what the heck? You feel like the world is about to end, you may as well eat it. But then he basically encourages them all to dig deep and find something worth fighting for and put the sandwich down. And that's how it ends. He's like, we can either go out there and fight, or I can eat this sandwich. And it's so weird. It's obviously meant to be like kind of poking fun at these types of scenes, but it actually works. Like, it's actually like a good, solid pep talk hurrah scene. It actually gets you fired up for this final fight. It ends with the classic team walking in slow motion towards the camera, like you see in Guardians or Avengers or anything else. And it does it basically all straightforward. One of my favorite lines in his speech is he says, we're not your classic superheroes. We're not the favorites. We're the other guys. Which could be like the tagline for our show. That's kind of the movies that we talk about. But it's really good. It's William H. Macy's time to shine in this movie, which as deep as this cast is, they all get that moment. I think he nails it. I think from a storytelling perspective, the reason I picked it is genuinely works as like a ramp up to the climax of a superhero movie. You could put this scene and, switch out the characters or whatever and put it in almost any other team up movie and play it totally straight. And it works. And Andrew, it shouldn't work. This shouldn't work in this movie. This movie is so ridiculous. We just talked about watermelons on Mr. Furious's feet. They shouldn't be able to pull off a sincere moment like this, but they do. It gets me fired up every time. I love this scene.
It's very good. I agree. It's memorable. It like you said, it shouldn't work, but it does. And like you said, it gives William H. Macy like his moments, because like everybody's kind of got these big moments, and he gets a couple. Like William H. Macy gets a couple. Like when he tells his wife that he's like, I have to go and do this. Like, and she's like, I won't be here when you get back. And he's like, and that's okay. He's like, because and he gives this big impassioned speech about what being a superhero really is. And I think that's one of my favorite things about this movie in general, is that so many of these characters just have this genuine earnestness about being the good guys. And the only thing necessary for evil to win is for good men to do nothing, and these good men aren't going to settle for doing nothing. And that's always going to hit for me, because my favorite superheroes are always the ones that are just people that were superheroes before they had the powers.
Right.
If that makes any sense. Yep. Like, the guys that had the powers, or had the traits, had the morals, and then got the powers and decided that the powers weren't going to change them.
Skinny Steve Rogers.
Yeah, Steve Rogers, Barry Allen. The original Barry Allen was very similar. Superman is a bit of more of a, he kind of always had powers, but the morals are a huge part of it. But it's always cool. And William H. Macy kind of embodies that here. So I think that's very cool. And like you said, great scene.
As much as this movie is kind of a deconstruction, examination, spin-off, spoof, whatever you want to call it, of the superhero genre at large, it's obvious. I mean, it came out in 99. Batman franchise dominated the 90s. That is obviously the biggest draw and inspiration for this movie, especially visually.
Yeah.
The opening titles, they're in storm clouds, not quite in space like you see in Superman, but there's giant Mystery Men logo floating through the sky like you see in like the Schumacher Batman movies, and the camera flies through it, and we get our first glimpse of Champion City, which has blimps all around, which I assume are police blimps, which is the Batman thing, which is something that's never existed in real life, but it just worked. But it's just big, towering, dark city, and there's a giant Captain Amazing statue, just like, again, you would see in Schumacher's Gotham. So it's almost a 1-for-1 for Gotham City. Maybe not as much neon as Schumacher would use, but man, this city is so gorgeous in this movie. It's brought to life with miniatures and matte paintings, and some CG as well. It all works together to make like this tactile, beautiful city that you just sound like an old man laying at the clouds. I know you don't see it anymore. Like, movies are still great, folks. It's just a little bit different. This specific flavor of city and set design is something I greatly miss. And again, of all movies, Mystery Men just absolutely nails it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about this before. We were talking about the guy that shot this is the same guy that shot The Shadow, and you get a lot of that similar vibe in between it, especially when you look at like some of the other stuff he did, like Untouchables. Like, the guy who shot it has an eye for creating these lush cityscapes, and that definitely comes through here. Like, so there's a lot of influence from like definitely Schumacher's Batman in the look of it, but it looks, like you said, it's a fantastic looking city. It's very got that gothic feel. It looks like it's massive. Like, it looks like it's almost a Dredd-esque mega city type thing.
It's
where
almost
there's
it's
so
like
many layers to it.
Always nighttime or storming. It's just always dark.
It's never no sunlight in Champion City. Which, maybe that was on purpose. I'm sure it was a deliberate choice, but you definitely agree. It's a fantastic looking set. They do have a lot of practical sets that they use for a lot of the scenes in the city, but the looks of the city, it's all very cool, and it create you feel like you're in it. You don't feel like you're looking at a set, really, which is always something that you struggle with in some of these movies, where it's tough to be like, oh, well, this just looks like a set. It doesn't look like it matches the rest of what's going on. This manages to blend it pretty well.
The opening action scene really sets the tone for this movie. It's in an old folks home, which, this is like a silly, send up of superhero movies. But it's like the coolest looking old folks home you've ever seen. Again, it looks like an old folks home in Gotham. It looks like one of the Gotham balls that you saw in the Batman franchise, but it happens to be an old folks home. And it gets taken over by these criminals known as the Red Eyes. How do we know they're the Red Eyes? Because they have red goggles on their eyes. And if that's not enough, the main one says, "We're the Red Eyes." So everybody freeze.
The main Red Eye played by Artie Lang himself.
Yeah, what, 2 minutes of screen time?
Maybe, if that. Jesus, there's a lot of cameos like that. This movie's full of some pretty interesting pieces like that.
Man, just like the Aldang is burned into my brain. There's a scene here because our trio of wannabe superheroes are first ones on the scene, and they try to take down the Red Eyes. Unsuccessfully until Captain Amazing shows up and saves the day. But while our heroes are kind of bumbling their way through it, one of the Red Eyes has the shoveler, William H. Macy, over his shoulder, and Blue Raja shoots a fork, and it hits William H. Macy in the butt. And his reaction, you would expect like a yow, like ooh, but instead it's like, it's like he got hit with like a tranquilizer dart. It's just such a weird reaction to the fork in his butt.
It's like defeated. It's completely defeated response where he's like, ugh.
It's just a weird decision that's always just stuck out to me.
There's so many little decisions in all the performances where I'm just like, were you just messing around? Were you having a good time? Did they ask you to do like 17 different reactions and they picked the best one? I don't know. There's earlier on, like, right when the Red Eyes come in, there's a scene where the main guy is just like, ooh, cake! And like runs over to this giant cake and like grabs a giant piece of it. And it's just all these things are burned into my brain. This movie just lives in my head rent free all the time. But this scene is really fun. But you said it sets the tone. Like, they come in, they are completely overwhelmed, they are completely ineffective. And then Captain Amazing shows up and beats up all of them single-handedly.
In seconds.
Like, so we already know what the status is. We know how these guys rank up versus Captain Amazing. And like, they introduce themselves to him afterwards, and he like is like, oh, you're superheroes. Okay. And like, you can tell that he like you can feel the disdain.
Super condescending,
he's just like, keep up the good work. Like he's making fun of them. But Shoveler and Blue Raja are like enamored. They think it's the best thing in the world to talk to him, and Mr. Furious is the only one that's kind of like, nah, he's making fun of us. But yeah, this scene is, like I said, you know what you're in for right out the gate, basically.
We've talked a lot about how great Greg Kinnear is in this movie. I mean, you got your Mark Strong Award, and as Captain Amazing, it's just so good. He gets one key scene as Lance Hunt, the billionaire alter ego, and it's when he's helping get Casanova Frankenstein released from the insane asylum, which is basically Arkham Asylum. It looks just like Arkham from the Schumacher movies. So he's having a parole hearing, and Lance Hunt walks in, and he's Bruce Wayne. I mean, he's dressed up in his nice suit and everything, and he tells him, "I had dinner with an old friend of mine. Maybe you've heard of him, Captain Amazing." And he leans into it just as much as he leans into the superhero persona. And he gets, to play two sides of the, Batman-esque character. And no joke, he probably could have done a good job as Batman. I think he might have been better than George Clooney if he got a chance to play Bruce
You never
Wayne.
know.
But he plays both sides of the coin.
I love this scene, too, because he's like, I had dinner with an old friend, and he's like, and he wanted me to read this note, and he pulls this piece of paper out of his pocket and starts just talking, but when it cuts to the piece of paper, it's just like a grocery list. It's nothing. He's just BSing this whole thing off the top of his head, and it's very fun. He's very effective. Like you're right, this is a good scene to kind of see the other side of it, but he's so good in this. And one of my favorite gags that my brother and I will still say this as an in-joke to each other is Lance Hunt wears glasses. Captain Amazing doesn't wear glasses. And It's this whole scene where they're arguing because Ben Stiller's character has decided that Lance Hunt must be Captain Amazing because they look exactly alike.
Yeah.
But William H. Macy and Blue Raja are both firmly on and that's their argument. He wears glasses. Lance Hunt wears glasses. Captain Amazing doesn't. And Ben Stiller's like, he takes them off when he transforms. And I just love, that doesn't make any sense. How would he be able to see?
Yeah, it's so naive. It's endearing. It's an obvious, Superman joke because that's
right.
kind of his thing. But even Superman, like his hair is different. Like it's more than just the glasses. But
the glasses.
In this case, it's literally just the glasses. Because Captain Amazing, you see his whole head. He doesn't wear a mask, a domino, anything. It's just the glasses, and that's enough.
I do love the during when Casanova's kind of mobilizing for the final push for whatever he's doing, and he gathers all of the gangs in the city together. I love some of the bit cameos we get here. One of which is the Goody Mob, including CeeLo Green, are in the movie as the not so Goody Mob in this case. But I love clever. Here the Frat Boys features literally a cameo from Michael Bay. Like
what? It's hilarious. It's very funny. Yeah. Why? I don't know why this happened, but it's very funny. And that's one gag. That for years, in 1999, I didn't know that was Michael Bay. It was probably years before I read that and like, oh, okay, that's a weird. The guy that wants to take brewskis, I guess that makes sense. Yeah,
I guess. Yeah. Now that I think about this, it actually sounds completely accurate. But yeah, he literally is like, can we bring the brewskis? And Casanova's like, yes, of course, you may bring the brewskis. And it's the thing where I've watched it back, and I didn't even know, like I said, you didn't know that was Michael Bay at the time, and then suddenly I put two and two together, and I was like, no way, what? Serious? Oh my god, it is him! Like, holy heck! But all this scene is just, again, it's just Rush chewing the scenery, talking about his big grand master plan. But this movie is so good, man.
It's so good. I love, Shoveler can't wrap his head around Lance Hunt being the same guy as Captain Amazing. And at the end, during the rescue scene, or the attempted rescue, he holds up like two washers like in front of his face. Try to like imagine Captain Amazing with glasses on. He says, Captain, I'm just going to ask you directly. Do you know billionaire Lance Hunt? And Captain Amazing goes, yeah, it's me. He's like, really? He's like, no, I just always wanted to do that.
Again, it's just such a douchey thing to do, and Kinnear just is so good at it. And that sequence is followed immediately by the toggle sequence where Captain Amazing apparently knows exactly how to shut down this machine. And is trying to explain it, but they get into this like weird, like backwards circular conversation where neither side is particularly making clear what it is they've done. So they end up arguing, and then ultimately Blue Raja just comes over and flips a switch and ends up accidentally killing him. But I love the sequence where right afterwards where that happens and Blue Raja's like, oh my god, what did we do? And the Shoveler is like, what do you mean we? I'm standing over here.
Somehow that scene is still jarring to me as many times as I've seen this movie. I remember seeing it for the first time and being like, no, they didn't just kill Captain Amazing. He's not dead. Like, they're going to reverse it. No, they make it very clear he is dead. He gets like morphed, one eyeball's falling out. He's got these gross pointy teeth stretched back across his face. His hand falls off because he is dead. And like, I don't know, the scene is always more graphic than I remember. It's always just because it happens so fast. Like it
does
flips a switch and he's like, oh, wrong switch, and then blah, he gets like stretched out and deformed.
It's psychofraculated, man.
It's psychofraculated. It is wild and one of my favorite gags in the movie.
It is wild. I do love it. But it's so jarring. But the scene is hilarious, and it's like you said, it's a genuine shock because at that point it changes. Because to that point, their whole job was just to rescue Amazing. It wasn't to save the day. It wasn't to stop Casanova. It was to save Amazing and have him do it. And that's then the movie changes into, oh no, we actually have to do this ourselves now.
Those new costumes are pretty dope for the finale.
They are.
Some of them are more like, Mr. Furious is pretty subtle. He just becomes Bam Bam Bigelow. Basically, he just gets flames on his jacket. But they look like legit superhero costumes. It's pretty cool.
They change into superheroes.
There's so many characters. There's 8+ heroes and stuff, and they all have a character arc. They all get resolved. Like, again, this is like a great case study on like how to do an ensemble movie. And I love Mr. Furious finally getting like his cool line, because he's had so many duds. And he finally confronts Casanova Frankenstein and says, "You must have ripped the Q section out of my dictionary, because I don't know the meaning of the word quit." And it cuts to a few like reaction shots of people going like, "Oh, like, hey, that was a good one. That was
nice."
actually kind of cool. But for the most part, I was thinking about it watching this movie this most recent time. Like, the movie is about supporting your friends and loved ones. That's like, this movie has like such a good heart. I mean, the original trio are like 3 friends that will never give up on each other and their mutual dream that they have. And even like Shoveler, when his wife says like, "I'm gonna leave you," and he has to go do what he thinks is the right thing, she sees on the TV that he actually is a superhero, and that gets resolved. And she allowed him to follow the dream this long, and he actually succeeds in it. And BotR has a reconciliation with her father, who finally gets revenge on the person that killed him. And Blue Raja has a moment with his mom, and every single like domino falls down. Everyone has a support system that pays off. Their faith in one another is rewarded at the end of the day. And it's such a sweet heart in the middle of this movie that, again, shouldn't have one. This movie shouldn't have like satisfying emotional arcs, but it does, because it's a very good movie.
It is. It's actually, like you said, it's almost masterful, because this is something even ensemble movies now still struggle with. Like, it's almost impossible. You very rarely see an ensemble movie that gives maybe more than 2 or 3 people a genuine arc, like, because they want to focus on the big characters. This one really does focus on everyone. Everyone gets a moment. Everyone gets an arc. Some people have bigger arcs than it. Like, Spleen doesn't really have an arc, but you get Spleen and Invisible Boy like becoming friends and striking up their own support system between themselves, and it all works. And like Hank Azaria and his mom is one that particularly I think is very sweet, and it works because she kind of finally gets it. She finally understands that like her son is not going to be, the stereotypical, prototypical son. He's got this thing that he does. And I love the scene where he's like trying to explain to her what's happening, because he's like pillaging the silverware drawer at like midnight. It's like, and his mom is finally like, comes downstairs, and he's like trying to explain, and he's going on, and then she finally just looks at him and she's like, "Do you need more forks?" And she takes him upstairs and she shows him this like super nice set of silverware, and she explains that it belonged to her great grandmother. It's again, like, on paper, it sounds like this very ridiculous concept of like his elderly mother entrusting the family silverware to him to use as a superhero, but within the context of the film, it works, and it's a very sweet scene that actually, like I said, is very effective.
It is. It shouldn't work, but it does. Kind of a running theme in this movie. And speaking of this movie being ahead of its time, like I said up top, Andrew, the finale of this movie, the supervillain's master plan is to create a sky portal. 1999, we got a sky portal in a superhero movie. This is before Suicide Squad, before Avengers. This might be the first superhero sky portal. Who would have known?
Sky portal.
The literally last scene of the movie where they're walking away from the rubble and there's like a TV crew coming up. There's like 20 jokes jammed into like 2 minutes. Like, I was just jotting. It's so funny and on brand for every character. They're talking to the shoveler and he's explaining, "We struck down evil with the sword of justice and the hammer of not bickering." It's like something that Tick would say. And my favorite though, Sphinx says, "We're number 1. All others are number 2 or lower."
That's another one that I genuinely say more often than I probably should.
Even the bowler, I got it. Talking about the performers bringing something to the character. Because they're all talking about who the real heroes are. The person who works at the DMV and the tough jobs. And she throws in people who support their communities and independent film, which that's Janine Garofalo talking to the audience directly.
I love that William H. Macy keeps going on, and he's like, and the guy who drives the snowplow, and the school nurse, and they finally have to cut him off.
Yeah, it's so good. So good. It's a good movie, Andrew. I hope we, if you've seen the movie, you understand how good this movie is, right?
You get it. Go
to Rotten Tomatoes and make sure we get that score up. But if you haven't checked out Mystery Men for whatever reason, I can't recommend it enough. Especially if you listen to this show, if you like superhero movies and this genre, it's a must-see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, it literally is and I feel like we might be preaching to the choir here, but it's definitely a movie that like I said, I watch it all the time. And it didn't make a big impact. I don't even know if I'd go as far as to say it's like a cult film. I feel like it is, but I don't really know. I definitely don't think it's on the scale of some of the other stuff that's definitely got cult status.
I mean, I can't recall ever seeing like a midnight showing or special showing of Mystery Men at, Alamo Draft House or anything. So I don't know, man. Maybe
I definitely saw this at Alamo Draft House at least once.
Well, I'll cut that then. I was trying to support what you said, that it doesn't have a huge following.
But still, just a one-off screening. Alamo Draft House shows a lot of stuff one-off. But
backpedal.
But yeah, it's got heart. It's funny it's funny as hell. I mean, straight up, this is a movie with a lot of comedic talents firing on all cylinders, and people that aren't even necessarily known for comedy still being very funny and being used extremely effectively. And yeah, this cannot be recommended enough. If you don't watch this and have a good time with it, I don't know. I'd be concerned, honestly.
Well said, Andrew. That's going to do it for Mystery Men Talk this week. I think we made our feelings known. I think we hit all the high points and positives of the movie. Hopefully we didn't literally recite every joke in this movie. I don't think we did, because it's super dense with jokes. I feel like I catch more every time I watch it. What a movie that deserves to be celebrated more than it is. If you haven't, you should go to Rotten Tomatoes. Consider leaving an audience review of this movie. If you enjoy it as much as we do, I would love if we could be the catalyst, be the ones that raise that audience score to get it out of the trash can area, get it certified fresh by audiences. It's wild that it's lower than the critic score.
Yes, if you can, I recommend that you all help us get that 3. It's just 3%, guys. There's nothing stopping us from changing the tide of this film's legacy into what it deserves, which is the tomato, not the trash can.
This movie deserves the tomato, damn it.
But after you're finished leaving that audience review for Mystery Men, you should jump over to Apple Podcasts, where you can leave a review for this show. But more importantly, you should leave a review for every podcast that you listen to. It's important not just for us, but it is also important to them. It helps us grow, and it helps us reach more people so that they too can hear this message and this call to action, if you will. Because the more people that hear the message of Mystery Men, the closer we are to the tomato. And I need you all to remember the tomato. That's what the goal is. It's what we're all working for. And I believe in all of us.
The tomato, John Leguizamo. And jump into our Discord if you haven't already, the Best of the Rest Discord. There is a link in the episode description. Just follow. If you've never used Discord before, this is a perfect opportunity just to jump in. Just click that link, join us. There is a whole community of people there that theoretically enjoy our show, but talk about all kinds of interests. If you like talking about movies with people, that's a perfect place to do it. Comic books, podcasts, whatever it is, talk directly to us. Watch movies with us, just like we just watched The Punisher 1989 It was a great time. If you want to watch the next movie with us, hop in there and you'll know whenever that's coming. Be sure you join us next week for a very special Christmas episode of Best of the Rest. I can't wait for everyone to see the movie that we are covering and the special guest that we're going to have on the show. That's right, special guest next week for a very special Christmas edition of Best of the Rest. And remember, maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness, like Mystery Men from start to finish.
Get the tomato. Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way we're going to grow. We certainly appreciate it. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.
Oh, looky here. A multi-frequency radio detonator. You should be more careful when discarding incriminating evidence.
Oh, no. This is an amusing little gizmo. It's really quite cool.
Yeah? What is it?
Ugh. It's a chloroform deploying portable enticement snare.
Ah, dang!